I told y'all last week that week 3 was going to be uncomfortable, and I meant that thing. I mean, it just might be one of the most uncomfortable episodes yet. So stick with me, because this week we are not just talking about what the system did. We are not talking about what the system did to us from the outside, but we are talking about what sometimes we do to ourselves from the inside. And I want to say before we go any further, that this episode comes from a place of love, deep, honest, transparent community love. The kind that does not fetter you into staying in your stuck season. In the season of stuck, in a place called stuck. This is the kind of love that tells you the truth, because the truth, it sets and makes you free. So stay with me here. This one is going to require something from you. So with that being said, welcome back to SSQJ Chronicles, and I am SSQJ, and this is week 3 of Dismantling the Oppressed Mind. So if you ain't watched weeks 1 and 2, go back and watch them, and come back here, and it all makes sense. Alright. And like, share, and subscribe. Yeah, all that good stuff. Alright, so Moses has been on the mountain for 40 days. 40 days of receiving the law, the covenant, the instructions for how a liberated people is supposed to live and worship and organize themselves. 40 days of God speaking directly. Whew. And down at the base of the mountain, who we got? The people. The people are waiting. How are they waiting? And the waiting is long. And the silence feels like absence. And the absence feels like abandonment. And Exodus chapter 32 verse 1 says, when they saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, come, make us gods, who shall go before us? As for this Moses, this man, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. Really though? Really though? As for this Moses, the man who God used to part the Red Sea, the man through whom God sent 10 plagues to the land of Egypt, the man who led them out of Egypt, they do not know what has become of him? Really no. 40 days without visible leadership, and the community regresses. Not to neutral, not to waiting patiently, but they regress to the old framework they know for religion and worship, the Egyptian one. They ask Aaron to make them gods the way Egypt made gods. They take their gold and melt it down and build a calf and bow before it and call it the God that brought them out of Egypt. The audacity. But we ain't gonna judge. They are attributing the work of the living God to an idol they made with their own hands from the resources that He, the one true living God, provided. My God, we guilty of the same thing, but we gonna dive into that. And Aaron, who should have known better, who was Moses' own brother, who had stood before Pharaoh with him, who had seen the plagues and the Red Sea with his own eyes, Aaron builds it for them. And when Moses comes down the mountain and confronts him, Aaron gonna say, I threw the gold in the fire and the calf just came out. This calf came out. As if the calf made itself. As if he had no part in it. That, beloveds, that is regression. That is the mentality of Egypt reasserting itself in the most dramatic and costly way possible. And it caused them. Exodus chapter 32 and the chapters that follow represent one of the most significant consequences of disobedience. That the delay that should have been days became the wilderness that lasted an entire generation. I need to name something that I think will sober us up. Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 12, not verse 12, verse 2 says, it is 11 days journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. I hope I pronounced it right. Barnea. 11 days. That is the geographical distance between where Israel received the law and the border of the promised land. 11 days of travel. But it took 40 years. 40 years. Not because God changed his mind. Well, the Lord did want to cast. I ain't gonna go into that. This ain't no this ain't no Bible study. Not because God changed his mind. Not because Moses did intercede. He did some intercession in there, you know. Not because God changed his mind. Not because the promise was revoked. Not because the land became unavailable. But because the condition of the people was not ready to receive what the promise contained. The golden calf, the grumbling and complaining, the lack of faith at Kadesh Barnea. When the spies came back and 10 out of the 12 said we cannot take the land. This repeated disobedience, the unwillingness to trust what God had already promised and demonstrated. 11 days became 40 years because of the condition of the mind, the mindset, and the mentality of a people who had been liberated from Egypt, but in whom Egypt was still operating. And I want to say this as honestly as I know how to say it. Not as a judgment, but as a warning and a disclaimer. Because I believe in this community, and I believe my community, not the black community, I believe in what God has called us to do. And I do not want disobedience and regression and the rebuilding of what bound us to cause this generation what the golden calf caused that generation back in the Old Testament. Partial obedience is still disobedience, and procrastination is disobedience in slow motion. Now I want to ask the question that this episode has been building towards, and I want to ask it carefully and tactfully, because this is not coming from an intent in a space of accusation, but it is meant to shed some light and to illuminate. Where have we built golden calves? Not literal items per se, but you might be building. Some people might. He'll be building little altars. But I'm not just talking about little altars. But I'm talking about the dynamic. The same dynamic of it. The regression to what is familiar. To what is familiar when freedom gets uncomfortable. When the leader seems absent. When God seems absent. When the wait gets long and the silence feels like abandonment. Where have we taken the resources God provided and built something that looks like worship, but it's actually Egypt in a new form? A golden calf looks like returning to relationship systems and environments that we know are not good for us, but we return to them because at least they are familiar. Freedom is unfamiliar. Unfamiliar feels safe, and the mind reaches back to what it knows, even when what it knows was keeping is what's keeping it bound. Is what's keeping us bound. A golden calf looks like rebuilding within our communities. A golden calf looks like rebuilding within our communities, the same hierarchies, the same exclusions, the same who belongs and who doesn't. Dynamics that the systems outside used against us. When we sort out each other by shade, by class, by education, by zip code, we are running Pharaoh's logic inside our own community. That is a golden calf. A golden calf looks like self-sabotage at a threshold of the thing we have been working toward. The pattern of getting close to the breakthrough and then doing something consciously or unconsciously that pulls us back, because the breakthrough is unknown territory and the mind is not sure it can survive there. That is the golden calf moment, right at the edge of the promise. A golden calf looks like settling for a simulation of liberation, the appearance of progress without the substance of it, the seat at the table without the power to shape decisions, the title without the authority, the visibility without the influence, accepting the tokenism rung on the Einstein's ladder and calling it arrival. If y'all know what I'm talking about, go back to the last couple weeks episode. And a golden calf can look like religiosity without relationship, going through the motions of faith, the attendance, the language, and the performance, while the actual relationship with God that produces the real transformation has been replaced by the form of it. Israel called the calf the God that brought them out of Egypt. They used the right language about the wrong thing. Y'all probably tired of me reference this scripture, but I'm gonna keep on. Proverbs 16 and 18, pride goes before destruction and a haunted spirit before a fall. The golden calf was not just disobedience, it was pride, it was impatience, it was community deciding consciously or not that timeline was more important than God's. The 40 days was too long for them to wait. That need for visible leadership and visible worship justified building what was never supposed to be built. And Aaron's pride was in the complicity, in the volume of all this, in his refusal to hold the community to what they knew was right. In the path of the least resistance that became, in the path of least resistance that became the path of the most consequence. Leadership that does not hold The line when the community is pressing toward the wrong thing is not leadership. It is accommodation, and the wrong accommodation about that, and the accommodation of regression. However, if it seems, even though it may seem to be understandable, that does not protect the community from the cost of regression. It just spreads the responsibility of the regression. The distorted priorities of Exodus 32 were the same distorted priorities that Pharaoh operated from. Same one. Immediate comfort over long-term covenant. Visible relief over invisible faith. What we can make with our hands over what God has promised to build. And these distorted priorities, unchecked, unaddressed, unrebuked, produce destruction. That warning is as current and relevant for today. I want to take a moment before the reflection point and just be honest with you and shoot honest with myself. I have had golden calf moments, seasons where I reached back for what was familiar because the new thing was uncomfortable. Patterns I have rebuilt in new forms because the dismantling was harder than I expected. Places where I caused something forward movement when it was actually just Egypt with better aesthetics. And what I have learned is that the golden calf moment is not the end of the story. For Israel, it was not the end of the story. God was angry, yes. And yes, Moses was devastated and disappointed. There were consequences, real ones. But God, somebody say, but God. I'm so churchy. But God did not abandon the covenant. He did not revoke the promise. He did not disqualify the people from the journey. He corrected, he redirected, he realigned, and the journey continued. So, the point of this episode is not to condemn. It is to convict. It's to illuminate, to shine light. Because you cannot dismantle a golden calf you have not yet to realize as one. Yeah. They hit me. As the moment you recognize it, the moment you say, I see what this is. I see what I have been doing. I see the pattern. The recognition is itself the beginning of the dismantling. God is not surprised by your golden calf moment. He has been waiting for you to see it so he can help you take it apart. Alright? Your reflection for week 3 is, where is your golden calf right now? What have you been rebuilding, consciously or unconsciously, that looks like progress but is actually regression? What familiar pattern, sister relationship, or way of thinking have you returned to because the freedom felt too unfamiliar or the wait felt too long? Name it, because naming it is the beginning of dismantling it. And the second set of questions, where has partial disobedience been operating in your life? Where have you been doing almost what God said, or eventually what God said, but not fully and not on time? And what has that caused you? Sit with both sets of these questions. Bring them to God. This is not a moment for shame or condemnation. This is a moment for honest and transparent inventory. What we have done so far, we have done We have done hard work so far in July. We have established the frameworks. We have named the specific mindsets, and this week we've looked honestly at the patterns of regression that the oppressed mind produces when the liberation gets hard, and difficult. Next week is the turn. Week 4 is not another confrontation. Week 4 is the renewal. We have examined what a mind that has been generally transformed looks like in practice. What mental liberation actually produces in a person and in a community, and what it means to pass a renewed mind forward to the next generation. So they do not have to start where we started. The golden cow moment is not the end of the story. It wasn't for Israel, and it ain't for you and I. The journey continues. Again, like, share, and subscribe. This was someone who needs it, or who you would think would enjoy it. Whatever, just share it with everybody. Onward still, and this has been another SSQJ Chronicle. SSQJ Chronicle. SSQJ Chronicle. SSQJ Chronicle. Hey!